Welcome, Natalie. I'm so happy to be here with you. Natalie is a friend and colleague and kind of collaborator with me for the last couple years. We were peers in a cohort with Animus Arts and have kind of just stayed in touch since then. And yeah, I when we chat, it goes everywhere. And so I just thought it would be such a sweet share with my community for us to hear, about you and your practice and kind of just like the lessons that you're learning right now, lessons coming through you. Um, so yeah, so thanks for having this conversation with me and welcome. Can you share a little introduction about yourself and um, your modalities or how you would introduce yourself?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for inviting me and thinking of me to join you with, this podcast you're launching.
Mm-hmm.
So this is
Thanks.
exciting. I love
Yeah.
I love the fact that you're doing this. I love podcasts. I think that they're just I've always had this like um kind of little inkling for myself of like, oh, what would we like to start a podcast or to, because I think it opens up so many beautiful conversations and just emergence. And for me, like I do really well with like face to face, one on one kind of conversations.
Yeah.
It's something that I really, you know, I'm curious about and want to kind of get more into. And so being invited
Mm-hmm.
to be here is really nice. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
thank you for the technology that we're using right now, and hopefully it stays
Oh
stable.
my goodness. I know.
But
Thank you, technology beings. You're
yes,
making the way.
yeah,
More offerings to you. Apparently, you needed a little
yeah,
more love
yeah,
today.
exactly. But yeah, so a little bit about what I do. I mean, it's always so, to describe what I do in words and um, is always not my forte, but I do it. So I mean, I'm a body worker. I consider myself a mystic, a medicine weaver. Um, I come from a lineage of medicine weavers, and both my parents growing up were massage therapists, and my grandmothers as well, midwives and community people, and using plants and medicines to kind of heal themselves and
Mhm.
their communities. And so I grew up with that within my home, and then growing up also in Canada, and then just being disconnected from my roots, creates a disconnection. And but within the home, I always knew I had that kind of holistic, quote unquote, alternative way of viewing the
Mhm.
world. I grew up vegetarian. My parents are vegetarian. My grandmothers are vegetarian. My
Mm.
grandmother's through like religion, so they're Seventh Day Adventist. And my parents grew up in that religion, but then when I was born, they left the church, but they continued on with the diet. So I was just kind of raised like that. I mean, I have different views on that now, but yeah. So, I mean, my life and my journey is my medicine and what it is that
Mhm.
I share. So, I mean,
Mhm.
I if you want to give labels, like I'm an RMT and I do, body work, but I also offer container work and help people through ritual and ceremony and
Mhm.
understanding
Mhm.
the more than human world and understanding somatics and trauma through an animist indigenous lens. Um,
Yeah.
so, all all this stuff weaves into all the work that I do, all the decolonization work that I've done for myself, um, the anti-oppression work, all of that stuff is integrated in the work that I do and the way that I want to live my life, and the way that I relate to the beings in my space as well. So that's a little bit about what I do. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Absolutely. Well, at least piques interest if it doesn't make sense. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm tracking you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, is there anything you want to add about like just sort of the material world? Like,
Mhm.
where are you and who's in your household or, anything like that, like human
Yeah.
Natalie.
Yeah, so right now I've just moved, so I'm in a new home, and I for the past 2 years we were living in a tiny little apartment with me, my partner, and my son. My son's 6, and it was a one bedroom, and like literally we were all just sleeping in one bed, and it's a very cramped
Yeah.
space. And two
Yeah.
years of living in a tiny little nook, and grateful for all the experiences, and lots of lessons of how to deepen into my practice of relating to my environment, relating to the earth within a city context, because I live in Victoria,
Mm-hmm.
BC, um, and yeah, it was a rough, obviously, and I think for so many of us, the past couple of years have been pretty intense. But living in that space really allowed me to deepen into my practice of understanding what the earth and what the elements actually mean,
Mm-hmm.
and how I relate to them. And now, this spring, this opportunity opened up to move into, still in the city, but a little bit, kind of like in a area with houses and quieter streets, and big backyard and front yard and rooms and
Mm,
more space than
mm,
we've had, I think, and I can't even remember. We've
mm-hmm.
always lived in just like a room or like a unit that's just
Mm-hmm.
space. So having this much space, it has been really nice. It's like I'm lucky to be here, and I feel so grateful to be here and to be around the trees and the grass, and I have herbs that are in the garden, and really excited and just like settling into the space, um, communicating with the house. It's a really old house as well, and lots of work that it needs done. But just trying to feel into the beings that are here on these lands, and learning how to communicate
Yeah.
with them, and offerings, and really listening to what it is that wants to move through this space,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing if we can somehow make that happen together.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a little bit about my physical material location right now, and where I'm at and what I'm kind of doing. It's a little bit bumpy, and moves are always
Totally.
worrying about more changes than just the move. So
Mm-hmm.
I think the physical space is just a manifestation of everything else that's also occurring
Mm-hmm.
in our
Mm-hmm.
lives. So there's lots going on, but
Yeah, that tracks.
yeah.
Well, that might be a good entry point for one of the questions I like to ask folks, which is just what's nourishing you right now? Like what's been sustaining you through that transition or through whatever else is happening in life.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the land, always the land, you know,
Yeah.
my ancestors, the my my body, like, you know, I feel like I've done this work long enough that I feel like I can very easily tap into, um, those parts of myself within my environment that keep me grounded and rooted. It doesn't necessarily mean I don't feel discomfort and feel pain and trauma and grief and all the things, but, um, the practices that I kind of have are just kind of woven into my everyday understanding of my environment. So it's
Hmm.
not like really a separate practice where I'm like, oh, I gotta go do like my yoga like for an
Yeah.
hour or
Uh-huh.
something,
Now
or
I'm gonna ground.
yeah,
Yeah.
now I'm gonna sit and meditate. Although sometimes I do, and sometimes I was like, okay, right now I really need this, and I'll like. Recently, we went to a drum making workshop, out near, Cowichan area, up further up island, and
Cool.
it was such a beautiful workshop, and first time making a drum with the
Mm,
outside, and the elders speaking to us about his ancestral stories and his medicines and all that beautiful wisdom. So it was really nice. And so when I was going through some difficulties, I just like, okay, I need to grab the drum and
hmm
like hitting it, feeling the vibrations of it, and just going into my own practices of sounding, singing, sounding, moving. Um, so I do those throughout the day. Like I make sounds. Sounds is a really good way for me to just connect. Um,
Yeah.
Stretching, but more stretching like moving like a cat, kind of just like wiggling.
Yeah. Totally. The
Getting
wiggles. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then breathing, connecting to my breath as
hmm
much as possible, connecting to plants, herbs have been, more a part of my life. And I'm like really excited to continue that because I'm thinking now more and more about the herbs in the garden and what I want to plant, and then also making some oils and infusing oils with them and seeing how I can use them within my massage practice and with clients. And
Mm,
yeah, so I'm excited about that, and lots of ideas spurring around how I can help bring some of the things that I do and that I do for myself and my family, that I could share.
yeah. Which is kind of that time of the seasons, right? Like things sort of bubbling up and
Yeah,
wanting to be shared, like having a proliferation. So
totally.
that sounds lovely. There's a couple things I wonder if we could kind of pop back to, or like tease out a little more. Like one thing I'm noticing is, and this has been my experience of you too, that there's, you even said it, like so much of, I mean, I use the word practice, but so much of like what one might call practice is just like how you are living life. It's just
Yes.
like life.
Yes. Yeah.
And the notion of practice is sort of like a modern
Yeah.
Western, like colonial
Yeah.
differentiated thing. And but I imagine, particularly for some, maybe not all of my listeners and audience, like concepts or practice. I don't know what your words to use right now,
Yeah.
but the relationship with the land or with ancestors or even with body, um, where there are many who that will be new for,
Mm.
and even beyond our, like, people who will be listeners here, but like those, I imagine that those sound more complex than I think I experience, and at least from you're sharing, than you experience. And um, yeah, and anyway, so I just wonder if you might break down a little more, like, what do you mean connect to the land, or what do you mean connect to your ancestors?
Mhm.
And yeah, I guess maybe we could just start there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, if and I do get this too, like with, clients in my own practice of like, this is new kind of territory. And usually what kind of, I think the past few years has definitely uh, got the ball rolling in this conversation and bringing more awareness around it, especially for Westerners, and to wake up to, their own disconnection from their own lineage. And I think that it's, I see it's a process, and it's very much about being committed to like being in relationship and learning about
hmm
yourself. And a lot of the time people come to this work through, trauma. And it's like, that's the kind of gateway that kind of gets people, you know, maybe not all, but
As in, like, something's wrong. I need to go find something to help.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Uh huh. Uh
exactly.
huh.
It's like this searching or this yearning. And I think that particularly in the West, or colonial kind of mindset, there's been a severing of that spirit, of that lineage that flows through each and every one of us. Doesn't matter where we come from. But definitely, I think for especially European descent people, but really all of the West, it's just a severing of stories, severing of understanding of how these stories move through our bodies. And so I think that it takes time, and a lot of in the West, the idea of being well and healthy and happy and all that kind of stuff, it's founded on colonialism, capitalism, addiction, like all of this, like I need something to
Like an idealized state of
yes.
no pain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. It's like people
Yeah.
are yearning to kind of get out of whatever they're in and really try to search for something that's going to fill that void or that hungry ghost, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought about Gabor Mate's book, The Realm of
Mm-hmm.
Hungry Ghosts, or
Mm-hmm.
obviously it originates from indigenous wisdom of this idea of this, like, cannibalistic entity that just kind of wants to just more, 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 more. It's
Mm-hmm.
never
Mm-hmm.
satisfied. And so I think, for some people, this Western idea of trauma and pain, although it's necessary I believe that it's necessary for us to come to certain understandings around our upbringing and the trauma that we experience on an individual level. I don't think that it's just, it doesn't stop there. And
Mm-hmm.
the Western ideas of health and wellness don't um, don't go far enough to really understand how deep trauma goes, and not just, I don't, when I view trauma now, I don't view trauma as this like uh, thing that we just like need to get rid of. It's like
Mm.
it's it's an innate intelligence that
Mm.
allows us to develop resilience and to survive
Mm.
and move through
Mm.
and evolve. And
Mm.
so I think it is a slow, gradual process, and I think I try to approach it very gently with people. I know other people have different approaches. I mean, sometimes I am very direct, and I'm just about, if I'm working one on one with somebody, I'm going to be clear and what I see and what I notice. Because a lot of people get stuck in this idea of like, it's me. It's like, what I'm feeling is mine, and it's my story,
Mm. Mm.
my
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
pain, all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But what you have
Yes.
to recognize is that you're connected to everything, everyone
Yes.
around you. And so you are just um, a conduit for life moving through you. And so when we can start to become aware of the intergenerational connection and also the collective connection, we start to look at emotions, um, beliefs, thoughts that we're thinking that we just chuck to personality. We can start to be like, oh, this deep sorrow and this deep rage that I'm feeling is not just my own.
Mm-hmm.
Really feeling something collective here. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not easy to get to that place where you can be in that awareness while you're in it. It takes
Yeah.
it takes
Yes.
time. So it's not easy. It's hard.
God, yeah. Hmm. It's making me, I mean, to draw on like a Western storyline, I'm thinking of like Gollum with
Yeah.
our pain, our stories, like, it's so mine, like, do not take this from me.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's such
Yeah.
the temptation.
For
Yeah.
sure. It is. And there is, like I said, a part of the journey that you do have to claim as your own. And that's a piece of
Hmm.
the, being able to see yourself as living again, as worthy, as, belonging, and
Yeah.
that's one lens, one fractal of the whole that needs to be processed and moved through. But it's not the end. And that's where I think the West medical system, the Western medical system, and ideas of healing are really far behind because
Mm-hmm.
we stop there and then people just get stuck in their stories and get stuck
Mm-hmm.
in their own pain and they can't expand
Which is really lonely.
super lonely. It's really,
Yeah.
really lonely. And life is lonely. Like and that's the it's going on this journey of reconnecting back to ancestry and back to the land. It's not an easy journey and there's so much death that occurs around our beliefs and our thoughts and our emotions and all the things that we think or who we think we are
Mm-hmm.
just starts to dissolve. And that's why I always think that it should be a gentle process because
Mm-hmm.
we're all dying. And
Mm-hmm.
how can we make that more of a gentle process, because it's not an
Mm-hmm.
thing to experience collective death. Um,
Yeah.
and so just taking it easy, being compassionate with yourself, kind with yourself, and understanding that it's a journey and that there's nowhere to attain. It's not about getting rid of the trauma or getting rid of the pain or getting rid of, you know, these ideas of polarity that we have. It's like the dance between between
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, one part in that I feel curious about is, I guess maybe a place to circle back to is from your story or your journey. I heard you say like living in Canada and kind of at some point having to reckon with the disconnect to the land.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I'm wondering, like, is that something you were aware of?
Mm,
Um, I don't know, like as a child, or how did you come into awareness of that?
yeah.
Um, and sort of the bridge from there is like, we've had some conversations about this too. Um, like for people of European descent
Mm-hmm.
living on land that has been stolen and colonized, I'd love to hear your take on what does having a relationship with the land mean,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you know?
for
And
sure.
maybe to maybe a valuable piece of information for folks listening to hear is your lineage or
Oh
your
yeah.
cultural heritage.
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna say is that I a mestiza, indigenous, Latina, queer woman. So those
Mm-hmm.
are, the intersections that I, identify with, and it's
Mm-hmm.
taken me a long time to claim that identity. It's been a lot of
Mm-hmm.
work to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think growing up, I was taught by my father. Most Latin Americans were mestizos, which means like we're mixed. It's like saying Métis. We have European descent and indigenous from the Americas.
Mm-hmm.
So I have both, and I think growing up, my father, he's indigenous. He's dark, very visibly indigenous. My mom, she looks more white, um, but on both sides, both have um, indigenous and European descent. I think on my mom's side, there's more European. So I think I have like some French and some Spanish and German, but
Mm-hmm.
um, growing up, my father did teach me and talk to me about colonization. And so he would always say, like, what they're teaching you in school, the history books, they're all lies. Don't listen. so so I already knew that, and so I believe my relationship with connection to spirit and to land came very much from my father and my mother too, just in a different way. Um, and so as I, when I came to Canada, I was really young. I was 3, and, having to learn a new language. When I went into school at the age of 5, because I spoke Spanish at home, it was really, hard. And
Mm-hmm.
growing up, because of my lighter skin, I think I was able to kind of blend. And, I did go to school
Mm-hmm.
that was diverse in Toronto. You know, Toronto's a very diverse kind of city. So um, I didn't really, even though my dad did speak about racism towards himself, at the time there weren't like really in-depth conversations about how that applied to me and my
Mm.
experience. And I, at the time, also didn't know how to have those conversations. I knew it was there, but I just didn't. And then when I was finally, into adulthood, my parents had split up. There was a big traumatic event. My depression set in, and that opened up a whole can of worms. And
Mm-hmm.
I started to deal with a lot of the trauma that I was not fully aware was locked in my body at the time. And then most of my 20s was just like a roller coaster of
I
navigating.
feel yeah.
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 Yeah. Um, so yeah, I think that I did have the foundations there. At the time, I wasn't aware that I had those foundations. I was
Mm.
so much, immersed in the Toronto and Canadian culture. It's like no culture. It's like you just
Mm.
very fluid and blending and
Mm-hmm.
assimilating in many ways, and not recognizing the deeper issues that lied within me. So when I started that journey for myself, it was really hard. It was really hard. There was so much rage. There was so much pain. There was so much, um, I didn't fully understand what was happening. Now I look back and I get it, and I understand what was going on. And there was that was all necessary in order for me to get to the place where I'm at now, where now I can claim my also my journey of reclaiming my indigeneity from my European ancestry as well, and
Mm-hmm.
understanding that it's there as well, and it comes
Yes.
from all the things that I didn't see or I didn't acknowledge, or we kind of check to like the mundane, the just like thing, personalities, or again like thoughts, emotions, beliefs, circumstances. um, it's just life, but they're ancestral, their ancestral patterns and their ancestral
Yeah.
wisdoms and trauma and resilience, and all of it mixed into one. So um, I started kind of more intentionally doing kind of deeper work back in um, probably 2012, 2013, something like 2012, 2013. Um, actually, when I was at school, probably. So that was 2010. I started therapy, talk therapy. I was the most depressed in my life at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But then from then on, just like, but really that's not the starting point. It was way before that. But that's
Mm-hmm.
say that I kind of started going down the Western route of healing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I think that I don't remember the question, but
Well, no, no, all of that was so great. The just the piece I'll thread back through is like, was there any point, maybe even from there, like having started down more Western modalities, was there any point where you were like, oh, this is not enough? And
mm,
where like relationship to land and ancestry and, the coming back to indigeneity, like, was there a turning point or, I mean,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when I started the conventional therapy, I was in school. Then I went away. Once I graduated, I went away and worked on a cruise ship, and did all that. Came
I
back.
love it.
Yeah, it was it was fun. It was great. I mean, it was intense,
Yeah.
but it was good.
Oh, to be 20 in our 20s.
I know, right?
I would not go back. I would not go back.
No, me neither. I'm actually
Oh,
really happy I'm getting older. Like I'm just like, yes, this is gonna be good.
that's
Um,
beautiful.
yeah, and so I think that I came back, continued therapy, then eventually got into sex work as well, and started to go down that path, and learned a lot from that experience as well. And then I had a nervous breakdown back in 2014, and that's when everything shifted for me.
Mm-hmm.
When I was admitted into the hospital and I had to start taking medications and, really stop working and all the things that were coming to
Mm-hmm.
crash in my life
Mm-hmm.
were,
Mm-hmm.
were basically the breaking point of me having to surrender. And at the time I didn't know it. um, it was really scary and it was tough. Wasn't making money, and I had to couch surf for a little while. I was lucky enough that I had friends that allowed me to stay in their places, but my
Mm.
intention was like, I'm going to be on this medication for about a year, and after that I'm going to find alternatives, because I knew that medication wasn't the sustainable option for me. um,
Mm-hmm.
it just I just knew that because I grew up understanding healing in the ways that my parents taught. And so for
Yeah.
me it was like, okay, I started to got do more therapy. I also tried to get a part-time job that paid cash because I was also on social assistance. And so it was a really trying to scramble money and support
Gosh. Yeah.
to different things. And I
Yeah.
knew that part of the journey was going back home to see my family, going back to Costa Rica. I'm originally from there, and my father's from Nicaragua, and both my parents were down there. And I hadn't seen them for years. And so most of my 20s was also kind of on my own. I didn't have adults to kind of protect me or to guide me. There was a lot of pain also from my parents' separation. So a lot of working through that. And so that separation was necessary at the time. Um, but I knew that part of the healing was I needed to go back and stay with them for a little while, and just and then I was also looking into um, ayahuasca uh, retreats that I could volunteer at, and that I could
Mm-hmm.
offer my services of massage while also having a place to stay, and helping support the process. And I was able to find that. I went back, I visited family, I was able to find a place where I could volunteer. And it wasn't ayahuasca, it was iboga. And I don't know if for people in the plant medicine world, iboga is a plant that comes from Gabon in Africa, and really powerful medicine. And
Mm-hmm.
and at the time I didn't ingest it. I didn't do ceremony with iboga. I was just there supporting and weaning myself off of my medication, going to see a
Mm.
naturopath. My mom was helping me to do some cleanses and all sorts of things. Once I got off, I did do a whole bunch of plant medicine ceremonies with ayahuasca, and ended up getting pregnant. And, a lot of a lot of
Yeah, so many initiations. Yeah.
Yes, a lot of initiation. So I think the thing that shifted was the breakdown that I had, and then
Yeah.
from there it was a journey of preparing for motherhood that at the time I
Mm.
didn't know was happening, um,
Mm.
and getting pregnant, and then having a child just changes everything. And so that process really opened up and reawakened all the deep trauma that I carried, but also the resilience and the wisdom and the things that
Yeah.
ancestors were really wanting me to heal for my lineage, and to see and to feel. And yeah, so that was the kind of turning point for me. It was all difficult things. It was not like this like epiphany of like, oh,
Right.
to
Right.
connect with myself or something, and I need to, it was all through struggle and pain.
Mhm.
And it's
Sorry, folks.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. Fun times.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I kind of feel like just taking a moment,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I feel it too. I feel like
hmm
yeah. I'm curious to know like how that all lands for you and how
mm.
yeah, what comes up, what you're noticing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess since sensationally, it's like I do feel this kind of rising brightness kind of tingle through the front of my body. And like I'm, watching you with my eyes, I'm listening with my ears, but I'm also kind of like feeling, the characters that you're dropping in the field around us, right? Um, and I know parts of the story, but I also haven't really heard it in that timeline necessarily. So yeah, I think I'm just appreciating differently like the different chapters that I kind of heard you narrate, and um, really want to sit with that, like your definition of trauma as the teacher of resilience. It's not the problem, and really it's not even the origin of, if we were to call it a problem, it's not even the origin of the problem. Recently I was having I'm sure I'm not the only one who had this thought, but the thought was coming to me from wherever it exists, of like, in the absence of actual initiation into, adult, whatever stage of life and whatever communities we belong to, in the absence of that, crisis becomes an initiation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I heard that in your story, and I could trace that into my story. And because of our kind of hyper individualization, personalization of pathology and problems, yeah, when we exist in our crisis, it feels like that's all it is, instead of being connected to a longer storyline or a longer arc of like, no, you're going into the desert
Yeah.
to fast and, endure the elements or whatever, and you'll come back, and we'll welcome you back. And when you're back, you will be, you know you'll be grown up, or whatever. But like, I think we don't exist in cultures, in the dominant culture. The Western narrative of that doesn't hold that story arc for us. And so, yeah, I think so many people do, of many heritages, I would say, like,
Yeah.
wander without much help or guidance, or like kind of ability to have a wider perspective of what we're experiencing. And so, yeah, I guess I was just hearing that. And then I'm still sort of feeling the pull of this question around, like, around racial identity and cultural identity, and how that impacts what it means to have a relationship with land and ancestry. Like, especially out here, like Pacific Northwest, I think people interact with nature a lot. Like, we're in nature a lot. We may even be like connecting to nature or appreciating nature, or um, but I imagine you mean something different when you're saying having a relationship with the land. Like, I think even that wording, we're so, it requires treating land as kin, as being.
Yes.
And I think particularly or what I can speak from my experience, and I think, other white folks or folks with European ancestry who are, progressive or activists or trying to be good white people, all the things, we tend to have a very anxious avoidant relationship with the land. Like, we want to be connected. We have a kind of, maybe we're ecologically minded, like we believe in climate change is real, all those things. We want to be connected, but we also don't want to like claim something that isn't ours, keep being extractors or whatever. And so I guess what I can share from my journey, like it has definitely been a journey for me to like kind of come back to the land humbly, and knowing that I live on colonized land, but letting the land love me anyway, you know? And it feels almost wrong to say that, like, in, I don't know, in kind of the activisty,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? And and also because, so many people who are maybe ancestors of, or like the indigenous peoples of these lands, do not have the places of being able to connect to their own ancestral land. And so anyway, anything you want to respond to in that?
Oh,
Feels.
it's like juicy. I can like already feel it. I'm like, ooh. There's like
Mhm.
all these beings that wanna
Yeah.
um so there's but this is a really good question. There is something that's still inkling, and I'm like, about what you had mentioned before about what you heard around the overarching story and how it's
Yes.
a lot of the West, because we don't have those places of initiation within our culture. Um, those breakdowns that we have in our life can be somewhat of those kind of initiatory moments, and they can be, and they also cannot be. And I think that,
Right. Yes, that's a good point.
yeah, the really, it's because it's a really fine line of when people who are experiencing it, it's like to tell them, hey, you're going through an initiation. It's like, go fuck yourself. So I don't
Yeah.
know how else to say
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
Fucks, all fucks welcome. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And that's totally like valid, because initiation is something that's done culturally and as community and collective.
Right.
But how it's helped me, because of my understanding of my connection to ancestry and land, then for me, I can look back on that story and understand the weaving that was occurring and that's happening, and
Mm-hmm.
continue sharing my medicine and sharing my story. And my hope
Mm-hmm.
with being able to share this, that other people can um, reclaim that back for themselves, because it really
Mm-hmm.
is a part of reclaiming our ancestry and reclaiming our indigeneity and reclaiming the land within ourselves, of being able to look at those moments throughout our lives and see the interconnection and the weaving that's occurring through the moments in our lives, but also through the generations and through the many lifetimes that have collided in order for us to be going through whatever we're going through in those particular moments. So if
Right.
we can reframe that for ourselves while we're on the journey, it's amazing, I think, because we
Mm-hmm.
start to be like, okay, there's something bigger at play here, even though in this moment
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't feel like it. And really, initiation, when you look at it like real kind of indigenous, like initiatory, like their death practices. So you're
Mm-hmm.
and real death. You
Yeah.
you die, yeah, parts of your ego and parts of the collective, move through in their forms of death, but there are also like actual physical forms of death that may occur
Mm-hmm.
in initiation, and that is
Mm-hmm.
a very real thing to acknowledge through that initiatory process. It's
Mm-hmm.
ceremony, when you look at ceremony through life or through generations, it's a death process, and death is very much a part of life, and it's not an easy journey. And for some people, um, it yeah, it's just that those clicks won't necessarily happen within this life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for that, I hold that grief in my heart so much, and I
Hmm.
feel that pain really deeply, because that's a reflection of me and my
Hmm.
death, or my relationship with death. So just I would just wanted to say that,
Yeah.
just
That's
to
really good.
acknowledge that piece there. Um, but then, in regards to what you were saying about like relationship to land and my understanding of relationship to land, yes, it's very different than connecting to nature. um, I think when we frame it as nature, we frame it as other. We frame it as like something we have to go to or be with, that's separate from us.
Yeah. It's like same with practice. It's back to like practice. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I think that, when we're able to understand that the the earth is everything in the physical world, like
Hmm.
everything that's in physical manifestation is the earth. That's how I view it. Everything comes from the earth, everything returns to the earth.
Hmm.
My body, comes from the earth, will return back to the earth. When that kind of perspective starts to come up, and you start to actually see how everything actually is the earth, then that's when I think we can no longer bypass the actual pain, death, and destruction that exists within the earth.
Hmm.
Not necessarily that we're the causers of that in this like ego and anthropocentric, like way.
Yeah.
We're these viruses that are killing everything, and yes, we are. And there's more
And
to,
viruses are in the physical manifest world, like part of Earth. Yeah.
they're part of
Hmm.
the earth. And so I think that we have this idea in the West that the earth is this beautiful benevolent being, and she absolutely is, or they absolutely are. But I also believe that there's a destructive force, a dark force, the dark mother that I, am in relationship with, that I feel is very much present in every aspect of our physical reality. It's just we have
Yeah.
to be able to see through the veils, see through the illusions of separation between light and dark. It's like these
Hmm.
binaries that we create in order, polarity is a part of life. It's
Hmm.
part of the
Hmm.
sacred geometry that exists within all
Hmm.
life in order, so you need that polarity, but that polarity doesn't exist in isolation. It exists with
Hmm.
all the other different dimensions simultaneously.
Yeah.
So I think that, when we are relating to the earth, we're relating to the objects in our space, we're relating to our bodies, and we're seeing the death, the violence, the destruction within these things, because we're connecting them to the stories, the hands that they've touched, the people, the beings that they've weaved with, like the histories that they come from, not just the history of where the physical object comes from, but where the idea came from to create and
Mm.
manifest that physical object into existence.
Mm. Hmm.
So it's so much more complex than just we humans are destroying the earth, and we are horrible, and yes, we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot of beauty and resilience and creativity and art that comes from that kind of the polarities that exist, the oppression that exists. And that's not, and I'm not justifying any of it. I'm still, there's always gonna be a point of on this journey of taking responsibility for the harm that we cause. And one of the words that you really um, that you mentioned that for me is one of the values that is really, really important for me and for how I teach. And I do values work with my clients as well, with when I do container work, but not as like, values work in the sense of like, okay, let's grab this word and be like, okay, how can I be, how can I take this word and attain this way of being or doing?
Yeah. It's not a corporate strategic planning session.
No,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's really coming from the place of like words are alive, language is alive, and how do we relate to
Mm,
words and these sounds, these vibrations, and be in relationship within in a way that's going to allow me to receive as well as give back
mm,
and weave an understanding about this word to be able to emerge through me so I can share and I can embody it within my.
mm-hmm,
So the word that you used was humility. And that is one of the values that for me is really, really important. Not as like, and I think people have this understanding of humility as like, you be quiet and you just listen and you just, keep to yourself and
smallness.
smallness. And I
Yeah.
don't see humility as that, at least from what I've learned about humility and how I relate to humility. To me, humility is really about um, forgiveness. Is like, how can I
Mm,
go into every form of relating to my environment, to myself, to the beings all around me from a place of forgiveness? So, the humility itself isn't just a one word that I can just like contain in a box. It's connected to a lot
mm,
of other practices and other ways,
mm-hmm,
other words. So, forgiveness for me is like deepening into all the harm that I cause and all the harm that others have caused me. And how can
mm-hmm.
I be on a journey of forgiveness and know that every single time that harm occurs, violence occurs, death occurs, hurt occurs, that I'm forgiving not necessarily the individual that caused me hurt. If I, if I need to let them go, I let them go. But the forgiveness is much deeper than that. It's really connecting to the well of grief that connects
Mm,
all of us. And
mm-hmm.
so to me, that thread of humility, forgiveness, grief is really an important relationship that I try to cultivate. And definitely not perfect at it.
Yeah.
It's like definitely
Process.
a
Yeah.
process and, understanding, because you spoke about race and our, um, how does that kind of come into the mix of how we relate to the land. And I think that, being somebody who looks like me and comes from the lineage that I come from and the ancestry that I come from, being mixed, because I do consider myself mixed, how do I reconcile all these parts within me that are
Mm, mm-hmm,
causing harm to each other?
mm-hmm.
There was so many years where I was like, I'm in a partnership with a white male and being in an interracial relationship and having a son like
Mm-hmm.
brings up all the collective stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
being able to look at my own shadows, my own biases, my own like stuff, as well as being able to speak my truth and challenge his and all that kind of stuff, and being able to reclaim who I am in all my identities while also being
Yeah.
able to be fluid and understand that that's not really who I am. know?
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
I'm more than that, but I still inhabit this physical body, and I have to acknowledge
Yes.
the cracks of separation, the illusions of separation that exist within creation, and I'm a part of that. I have to acknowledge that difference and honor that difference and humble myself to that difference, forgive myself for the harm that I cause and forgive others for the harm that they cause, because it lives within a system that is functioning in way bigger ways than just my individual life experience. And
Yeah.
I understand that, and I'm rooted in that, and I, connecting to my grief, opening my heart really helps me understand that um, piece and that component, and I could still be rooted in my courage, in my strength and my authenticity to speak from a place of truth, because I'm rooted in the land. I'm rooted in
Mm-hmm.
my relationality with everything in my environment. So race is definitely a tricky one, because everybody has their own, their own heavy stuff around it. It's the dark. It's this dark, heavy entity that we have created, collectively, of separation, and we all gotta reckon with that part of ourselves, reckon with that darkness, reckon with the and I darkness and lightness, I see them as reflections of each other. I don't necessarily
Mm-hmm.
see them as these separate polarities, even though in the construct, the architecture of creation, there is a separation.
Yeah, we perceive them as polarity.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And that has to be acknowledged, but at the same time, they are just illusions, and they're both cannibalistic, and they're both self-consuming. Um,
Yeah.
so whether it's whiteness or blackness, or the spectrum of everything in between, it all has a version of the same thing. And so I think people within that are inhabiting particular bodies, we have different information around the fractals of information that exist within
Mm-hmm.
those versions of reality.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, all leading us back to the same source, unity. Um, Hopefully. I mean, yeah, that's what I hope
Yeah.
for.
You shared so much, and I love all of what you shared. And I think couple pieces that are like kind of ringing for me. One was just like when I finished my question and you were starting to share, I had this thought like, oh, I wish I had just added the caveat like, I hope I'm not asking this from a place that's like, um, you know, like give your people of European descent folks a clear, succinct, and hopeful answer for like, yes, we can we can also have a relationship to the land. And I didn't need to ask that because you definitely didn't. It was like, yes, this is an important question, and here's so many of the complexities to it, even while there is a simplicity, maybe kind of to like the way you brought it to close, which is like we are aiming towards unity. It's easy to try to dissociate in many directions to get there. I think it's easy to either dissociate or maybe how the construct enacts upon some of our consciousnesses is like either to dissociate from the nourishment that's available or the grief that you named. Like, and I think what I've aimed for in my work and in myself, like where that kind of humble returning or like tentative, sort of peeking into at the edge of the meadow for me has brought me is like practices of stretching my capacity for both of those individually and at the same time. And I loved, as you were describing, how, words require us to sometimes speak in the polarity, but I heard you continue to sort of bring back always the other side, like the earth is so beautiful and it's totally brutal. Like we won't make it out of here alive,
Yeah.
like, and like the grief is super real, and like it's not all there is. You know, we got to keep looking up out of the pit of our own turmoil or whatever. So yeah, I'm just hearing you kind of gather those themes really well as not easy, but somewhat simple. I don't know, you know, because it is fractal. It is like multifaceted on all these sort of compounding levels. So wherever we enter in, that's where we enter in,
Yep.
you know, and then relate as well as we can with humility and in a feedback loop that helps us grow wherever we're entering in.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And understanding that growth is just innate. It's just like there's no, there's no trying you have to do. There's like desire. There's a desire that
Yeah.
is important for you to connect to. So that desire kind of you are connecting and relating from a conscious place. But
Mm-hmm.
it, all of whatever entry point, whether it be like, joy, grief, rage, like all these like life experiences, you're entering the flow, the river of life, and
Mm-hmm.
that entry point is the perfect entry point,
Mm-hmm.
and it really is just, the way that I see it is like consciousness just wanting to know itself and wanting to
Mm-hmm.
create itself. It's, desire,
Mm-hmm.
the creative life force energy that just wants to move and evolve.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we get to relate to that bigness and then bring that down into like the smaller fractals and experiences that we have in our day-to-day moments and lives, and understand that it's all just a weaving, it's all just a flowing, and we get to experience, even like the disassociation or the distraction or the addictions or anything that kind of comes our way, not seeing them as these like, oh, it's just like this. It's like, no, that's actually a part of the flow. Like, can you move through
Mm-hmm.
your addiction? Can you move through your distraction or your disassociation with the awareness that's actually life moving through you, and that it's not sustainable to just be stuck in one. Like, that's when things can become, and even that, when you look out, it's like, you know, it's a necessary part of it to be stuck, and um, you know, for whatever reason, our collective consciousness right now is,
Yeah. So something gets worked out there.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's stuff that needs to get
Mm-hmm.
worked out and needs to go into these loops, and that's what's happening, and that's a part of the bigger picture. But we don't have to, as individuals, like get stuck in that loop. We can say, okay, I'm in it, and
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. When will I come out of it? When I won't, it doesn't matter. I can choose to just go create, go do whatever it is that I'm doing, but with the awareness that I'm doing it, and then
Yeah.
see what happens and see what occurs in, the relationships. Everything is just a reflection of that flow that's just constantly happening. And I mean, I think, you know, talking in this way is like, it's a very, it's, you're entering altered states of consciousness. I mean, everything's altered states of a state of consciousness, so we're always like dreaming, and we're always high in our own ways, or
Yes.
but
Uh-huh.
for those of us who have been trapped in loops or stories, for a really long time, expanding out can be really jarring and can be really
Yes.
intense. And so I say gentle, gentle. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
okay. The collective is doing what it needs to do, and we just gotta move with it and see what it is that wants to move through us, and what's inspiring us, and what desires we have, what dreams we can connect to that are rooted in the land, in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
No
Mm-hmm.
bypassing, no
Mm-hmm.
bypassing the pain, but yeah.
The two I don't know if the metaphor is the right word, but just like kind of maybe the two scenarios that were coming to me as you're describing like the flow and like, we can get kind of trapped in these loops. I'm thinking of both my own experience with plant medicine and then what I imagine, I have never given birth, but what I imagine like the birthing process is like, which are both altered states as well. Like
Yes.
you got to go somewhere when you're like pushing a baby out.
Yeah.
And that's already a portal, between the spirit world and material. And I'm remembering on a plant journey I was on having like, and thank God I didn't do this until recently, just a couple years ago. Like, thank God I hadn't done it in my 20s because I would have, it would have really ratcheted me into like an addiction ping pong. I just know it. But like having done as much of my own work as I had, I noticed, I remember that like I could be it was very, very intense. And I could actually be in the intensity with enough, like even just sort of a toe of my awareness out, able to say, like, this is hella intense and this is the medicine working. Like,
Yes.
this is the medicine working. And to not contract
Yeah.
around the experience, which I have heard, I don't know this firsthand, but like with in birthing for many births, like the pain is often intensified by contracting around whatever's occurring, like, or whatever part in the flow. And whatever, if you've given birth and you're listening and you're like, fuck all that. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe I'm totally wrong, but at least in the plant journey, I can say like, if I had ever, at any point, if I had been like afraid of what was happening or like, oh, this is too intense, shut it down. And there are moments where it felt almost that like, and it's no, again, as you said, it's not a problem if that happens. It's just a thing to bring attention to there. Oh, I have fear. Oh, I'm contracting.
Yes.
And, but if there's enough space to not have to contract, or if we can kind of catch the contraction a little sooner each time, like the flow can continue, the medicine can continue in a little less painful way, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's actually less that if you to not contract, because I mean when you're giving birth or when you're dying or whatever, like the analogy is
right.
like the
I
contraction.
guess contractions are essential, right?
They're essential. And I mean, some people call it like they choose not to use the word contraction. They used to call it like a wave or something like that.
Yeah,
Because it is. They're just these waves, these ebbs and flows.
right,
But
right.
I think it's fine to use contraction, like, and because for many of us, at least for me, I remember it was freaking painful. Like
Yes, yeah,
painful, and you're contracting and your whole body is like "Ugh." Like it,
yes,
it's completely going into the pain. And at the time, it was my first birth, and like it's scary. It's scary, and
yeah.
it brings up so much pain and so much trauma and so much grief. And so I think that contracting is okay. Like,
Mm-hmm,
contract, feel the if that's what your body feels like it needs to do that,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
just with awareness. Like, just know, like
mm-hmm.
what you said, of
This
like,
is contraction.
this is a
Yeah,
contraction. And even if you're like, you have like a little toe that's outside, and be like, okay, like this is the medicine. And it's like,
yeah,
call on, the prayers or the songs or the communication or whatever that's they're assisting you through that process. That's more than the human world and realm. And
yeah.
um,
Mm-hmm.
I think for those of us who have been disconnected from our lineages and ancestries, it's a lot harder because we think that we're going through it alone, and we think that the only support
Yep.
that's there is the people in our environment. And sometimes that can be traumatizing. No, like hospitals and
Yeah.
doctors, and
Yeah.
that can make it even worse. Um, so I think that when you're starting on the journey of reconnecting to ancestry, like it's important to just start like simple. Start with
Mm-hmm.
environment. Start with the plants that your ancestors used to use. what are the
Hmm.
plants that originally grow from the lands that your ancestors come from? What are the foods that used to be cooked at that particular time? What are the smells? What are the sounds, the music that they used to,
Hmm.
sing,
Yeah.
they used to dance to? Um, these are things that I think for European descent people, it's like kind of the illusion is that there's a disconnection there, there's a separation, or that it's not there anymore, or it's lost, or but it's never truly lost because it all exists
Hmm.
in the earth.
Hmm.
So I think that gently and slowly connecting to your body, understanding that part of life is feeling the pain, the contractions, it's part of the medicine. And then knowing that you have other supports around you that we just don't value, like we don't see
Yeah.
supports, or
Yeah.
the water,
Yeah.
the elements.
Yeah. We've forgotten our kin.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, like those
Yeah.
are ancestors. Those are ancestors to all of us,
Hmm.
no matter where we come from. So just connecting to the rocks, connecting to the the breeze, the air, connecting to the
Hmm.
fire, lighting candles. So many different practices and rituals, and obviously there's nuances in that as we continue on the journey, like with appropriation and all sorts of, I mean, everything's appropriated at this point, everything's become amalgamated and fused. But I think that it's important to honor um, lineage and ancestry and the origins of where things came from and how these wisdoms have traveled through time to get to us.
Yeah.
And so it's nuanced, and we're going to make mistakes and we're going to screw up, but it's
Hmm. That's part of it, part
yeah.
of the flow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, um, as a parent, as always, I feel like we could keep on talking. Like any one of those three things, we could have gone so much deeper on that note or on that note. And so, just a good setup for another conversation, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe I'll just have us close with just: is there anything else that I don't know is emerging through you right now? Something you want to leave people with? And any of your own offerings or anything you want to share about, yeah, how people can connect with your work?
Yeah. What I want to leave people with, I mean, always my my heart I offer,
Mm,
prayers I offer, and to just trust and know that you are connected to your ancestors and they're guiding you, whether you realize it or not,
mm,
and that, you know, if you need support, reach out to them. So
mm,
more than
mhm.
human kin, as well as the people who are already on this journey. Just reach out, connect, and
Yeah,
um, yeah, I send you my love. Be
yeah.
kind, be gentle, and
Mhm.
fierce as well when needed. Yeah, I think that's it. And then with the offerings, I mean, I live here in Victoria, BC, Canada. So whoever's here, then I also
Mhm.
do face-to-face work. I do like massage, but I also do container work, one-on-one. And then I also, for the online kind of community, I do online one-on-one containers as well. And
Mhm.
I'm, you know, I think I've been in the process of like really being patient, learning patience around
Mm,
the offerings that really want to come through around holding collective space and really being
mhm.
like having an offering, because there's just so many things that I want to share and so many things that I want to
I
do,
know.
and
I
it's
know.
just like, oh my god. So
Mhm.
but I definitely feel like even in the in-person space, I'm connecting with people here in the community, and I'm possibly going to order offer some in-person workshops and offerings
Nice.
6-month containers and stuff like that. But then also online, I'm working on that. Hopefully, I think towards the end of the year, more for like fall and winter, where I think
Hmm.
people potentially might need it the most. But I'm not yet sure whether it's going to be online, in person, or if it's going to be both. But either way, I do one-on-one work, and yeah, just reach out through Instagram, Facebook, whichever, email as
Great.
well, through my website.
Yeah, I'll include all of your contact in the show notes.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. But yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Kate.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie, and to all those who are supporting you and been a part of your journey and are kind of holding this space with us too, like who've been able to show up and have
Yeah,
their voices heard through you. That's just, yeah, a
totally.
lot of gratitude.
Thank
Hmm.
you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you to your ancestors as well for all the work
thank you,
for receiving us.
thank you.